Okay, good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Cherry Hill Public Schools Board of Education meeting, a special session on August 17th, 2021. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call.
Mrs. Arroyo, Mrs. Stratton,
Here.
Ms. Friedel,
Here.
Mrs. Matlack,
Here.
Mr. Avadia,
Here.
Mrs. Schultz, Ms. Stern,
Here.
Mrs. Tong, Mrs. Neary.
Here. Okay. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on August 12th, 2021 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the administration building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Okay, and now this will bring us to our public comment. The purpose of tonight's meeting was for the board to discuss a legal issue that needs to be discussed prior to the regularly scheduled meeting on August 24th, 2021. As such, the board will allocate 45 minutes for public comment, and then we'll be going into executive session. We will be alternating between written comments that were submitted in advance and live comments. Additional comments may be submitted to the board via email, although they will not be read publicly. Cherry Hill is a community that values education. Issues that affect our children, schools, and community bring out strong emotions in all of us. The Board of Education takes seriously its vision to work with civility. Please join the board in sending a message to our students that even the most difficult issues can be addressed while showing respect for one another. The next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, August the 24th, 2021. Comments will be limited to the standard 3 minutes. And there'll be the timer as with our previous virtual sessions. You will see the timer. And as always, clearly state your name and municipality. And I'll go to the first comment on the line, which is Cherry Hill Zone PTA.
Good evening. My name is Janet Hung, and I'm the current president of the Zone PTA for Cherry Hill Public Schools. I make this statement on behalf of the Zone PTA Executive Board. The Zone PTA Executive Board is excited for the return of 5 full days of in-person learning. We support the district's implementation of the governor's executive order effective August 9th, 2021, that all students, educators, staff, and visitors will be required to wear face masks indoors for the start of the 21-22 school year. While we respect the community's rights to regarding mask use on their own personal time, face masks on school grounds are about public health safety. We would expect all attendees to PTA events and activities to follow the district's policies on masking, as our students will do daily. The Zone PTA board chooses to be an example to the community regardless of our personal stances on the issue of masking. Our hope is that any Board of Education policy regarding mask wearing will set specific expectations regarding policy enforcement. As our PTAs begin to plan in-person activities resuming this year, we look forward to seeing our families in a safe and compliant environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Mrs. Sugars, did you have a written submission?
I do. The first one is from Elizabeth Hickman. Thank you for believing in science and following masking protocol in our schools. Thank you, BOE, for working so hard to bring our students an African-American course that the Cherry Hill students asked for. You are leading the nation as an example of schools bringing equality and equity to its students. I hope other schools follow your example. I hope Black students will not experience the same trauma the students who push for this course express they experienced in Cherry Hill. I believe in Cherry Hill and believe the African-American course brings us one step closer for equality and equity for all.
Thank you. Okay, next on the line, we have Kristen Viglietta.
Good evening, Kristen Viglietta, 2 Chateau Drive, Cherry Hill. First and foremost, thanks to each of the board members for all of the continued hard work that you put into this volunteer position. What you're doing is incredibly important work, and I personally remain grateful to you for taking it on. As the Board of Ed develops policies surrounding masking for the 21-22 school year, I respectfully request that both mask wearing and the enforcement of mask wearing be as clearly laid out as possible and communicated to all stakeholders in a multitude of ways from the top down. In thinking about this as just one stakeholder, the following questions come to mind. As this coming year brings visitors back into buildings, who will be responsible for enforcing policies at, for example, back to school night, during community rentals such as scout meetings, during on-campus meetings like PTA or student-run meetings? Who will enforce at PTA and school activities? And what will that enforcement look like at each of those examples? But especially when it's an evening event and perhaps the only folks in the buildings are the event planners and the janitorial staff. Perhaps there could be standard and clear guidance from Mr. Green made available to the person in charge of each of these events as to how to handle a community member who shows up maskless and won't leave, or how to legally handle a community member with a medical exemption so a legal and feasible, reasonable ADA accommodation is provided. You've demonstrated such thoroughness and thoughtfulness in your decisions as a board, and I know that will continue through finding solutions for these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, Mrs. Sugars, do you have another written submission?
I do. This one is from Nadine Kulzer. Please give children the option to wear masks. My daughter suffers from severe anxiety and panic attacks. Masks make it hard for her to breathe. Thank you.
Okay. Next on the line, we have Kim Gallagher.
Hello, Kim Gallagher, 1537 Hillside Drive. Limiting comments to only in person limits engagement. It was mentioned that coming to meetings to participate and comment at the Board of Education meetings is commitment. Commitment does not have a one-size-fits-all definition. Your characterization and definition of commitment to only allowing people to comment in person discriminates against people who are unable to attend meetings. The district and Board of Education is discriminating against community members who do not have childcare, who work at night, who lack transportation, and for many other reasons that restrict people to attend meetings in person. You need to realize that there are many avenues that allow people to participate in the community, and you should embrace those options to allow for all voices. Opening lines of communication is particularly important right now as you try to pass the bond. Restricting the community's engagement limits its desire and ability to support it. You need robust support for the fidelity of the bond, and that starts by listening to the community. Communication is critical and transparency is required. Do not keep limiting and shutting out the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do you have another written submission, Ms. Sugars?
I do. This one is from Allison Weisenstein. I'd like to submit the following question for the board meeting on Tuesday, August 17th. If the governor okays remote learning, how long will it take the district to get that up and running?
Okay, thank you. And next we have a telephone number. So please state your name and municipality, please.
Hello, my name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in 110 Kilburn Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm going to try to be fast. It's kind of long. I attempted to send an email containing a question and a PDF to all school board members. My question was, did we ever receive that state aid? Was that we were incorrectly shorted by the state when we switched from half day to full day kindergarten, and if not, why not? Of course, it was only a few $100,000, and it doesn't come close to the almost $225 plus million we were shorted by the state during the school funding formula, which is SFRA, from 2008 to 2009 till the present. SFRA district profile, Education Law Center, Cherry Hill School District, required state aid versus actual state aid. That's what the PDF that I attempted to send to all board members was a blog post dated March 2nd, 2013 on the blog School Finance 101. It was hosted and written by Dr. Bruce Baker, professor at Rutgers University, and he's going to be really involved in any upcoming modification of the school formula and change. In the comment section, I mentioned that we never received our direct state aid to education as per the formula. We are tens of millions of dollars above our local fair share. The state has shifted more of the burden of funding onto our local property taxpayers. State funding inequities lead to a cycle of higher local property taxes, eventually crushing communities. The state funding inequities from 2008 to 2009 are $225 million plus, not adjusted for inflation. Since 1990, when our aid was first cut, the total in inequities has been about $325 million, not adjusted for inflation. Even not adjusted for inflation, this amount would have solved most of our problems at the same tax rate. Let's see. I'm sorry. In 2009, property taxes paid as percentage of median home value in New Jersey was 1.89%, the highest percentage in the country. In 2009, property taxes paid as percentage of median home value was calculated per county. Camden County was the 7th highest county in the country at 2.5%. That is significantly higher than the New Jersey state figure for the same year, 2009. Okay? That's it?
Thank you, Dr. Potowitz. Okay, Mrs. Sugars.
Our next one is from Beth Becker. Thank you for keeping all our children safe this school year. My question is with regard to enforcement of the masking mandate. How will the district enforce the masking mandate during non-school hours and during times non-staff adults come into the building? As you are aware, our buildings are used for many activities such as Board of Ed meetings, PTA meetings, back to school nights, concerts, and even facilities rentals by outside organizations. How will the district ensure that every person coming into the building adheres to the masking mandate? Who will be enforcing the mandate? I'm also writing to thank the African American Studies course curriculum committee for listening to the students who have advocated for this course, as well as the students currently in our schools who will be taking the course. The work the committee did to educate themselves on both the subject matter and best practices in teaching this content is inspiring, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
Thank you. Next, we have on the line Melissa Bush.
In Cherry Hill, there are more than 71,000 residents. Your current decision to limit public comments to those only from people in physical attendance is inequitable, self-serving, and locks nearly every taxpayer out of the conversation. In fact, due to current COVID-19 social distancing guidelines, your public comment rule now only permits less than 1% of the population to contribute to the conversation at regular Board of Education meetings. Not only is this a travesty, but it is against everything the district preaches about ad nauseum. You cannot have it both ways. You can't cheer on inclusion and then muzzle the masses. Some residents recently have commented that attending and commenting in person is a privilege. In all actuality, it is a personal affront to the most vulnerable, those who have been working harder than ever. Our single parents, parents who must care for their children while their partners work, those who cannot afford babysitters, those who must be home for their children with special needs, elderly people, and students who cannot drive. Think about it this way. You want to redistrict the schools in the near future. Do you think hearing from fewer than 60 people will help get a plan that most can appreciate? You hope to pass a bond, which is a necessity for our crumbling schools. Will support from 1% of voters be enough to get you the money you need? Definitely not. You need us. Don't let this be your legacy. As our elected officials, you should not only open the door and allow comments from those in person, those who call in, and those who choose to submit their thoughts electronically, but you should embrace and appreciate their interest and engagement. It's time to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Sugars?
Jessica Fingerman. I was very concerned to learn that at the last board meeting, 3 members of the public, including 1 candidate for the Board of Education, attended the in-person session without masks and refused to leave when asked. I would like to turn the board's attention to Governor Murphy's Executive Order 251, which became effective on August 9th, which states that masks must be worn by students, staff, and visitors in the indoors of school district premises. I ask the board to cooperate with the governor's order and to ensure the health and safety of the members of the public who will attend future in-person meetings. Some members of the public mistakenly invoke the American with Disabilities Act to seek exemptions to mask mandates. The Department of Justice has issued this guidance. The ADA does not provide a blanket exemption to people with disabilities from complying with legitimate safety requirements necessary for safe operations. I ask the board to ensure that the public has access to meetings that are safe as possible given the continuing health emergency, and to do so by ensuring all visitors are wearing their masks before they enter the building, and to continue to do so for the duration of the meeting. Recently, there have been some well-publicized instances around the country where tempers have flared and conflicts arose around masks in school settings. I don't think that will happen here in Cherry Hill, but I would like to have our focus be on the children as much as possible and not on outside distractions from adults. In closing, I would like to say that there are many reasons I am proud to be a member of the Cherry Hill community and to send my children to Cherry Hill Public Schools. One of the greatest things we share as a community is our values, how we care for each other. These are values that are taught in our schools and in our homes, showing empathy, being kind, and thinking of others before oneself. Given the trauma our community and our country have endured these last 17 months, I think these values are more important than ever. Wearing a mask is a small gesture that us adults can do to demonstrate our shared community values.
Thank you. And next on the line, we have Carolina Bevid.
Good evening, Carolina Bevid, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. My comment is just to request that elementary schoolers only be asked to abide by the most necessary precautions instead of layer upon layer upon layer of precautions that really prevent them from having a typical, normal, healthy school experience, healthy from the standpoint of their mental well-being, their social development. I had a conversation with the principal today of the school that my children attend, and it ended with me heartbroken and crying because the description of how school will look this year is so depressing. I don't even know if I'll have the heart to send my kids into the building because it will be so sterile and unwelcoming. Disinfecting surfaces repeatedly, not letting children touch toys or balls to play with, it's cruel. So please lift any unnecessary layers of protection, especially for our youngest learners as they enter into another year of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bevan. Okay. I don't see other hands, Mrs. Sugar, so I'll turn it over to you for the remaining time for a written comment.
Okay. This is from Kristen Master. Thank you for continuing to stream Board of Education meetings such that the public can stay informed and participate in a safe manner virtually. Limiting public comment only to those attending in person skews the commentary. The last BOE meeting, community members were forced to decide either A, put themselves in an uncomfortable, potentially dangerous position to go inside a building in order to comment, or B, remain muted safely at home. The only equitable decision is to continue to allow public comment to be called or written in for every BOE meeting. Thank you to those that attended and spoke at the last meeting on August 10th, 2021. The individual that put on a mask and entered Cruzy expected all in attendance to be masked due to Governor Murphy's Executive Order 251, effective August 9th, 2021, mandating all persons entering any K-12 school building be universally required to wear a mask. The fact that this was not enforced and there were several unmasked individuals allowed entry and to remain in attendance was a direct violation of not only the governor's order, also community trust, and has dire and potentially costly consequences. As parents, we trust and expect the superintendent, Board of Education, and staff to enforce all laws and any executive orders to ensure our children's safety. Not doing so breaks the moral contract we have between parents and school staff. The strategic and targeted behavior from some individuals at the last board meeting should have been expected and planned for prior. I am cognizant that medical exceptions exist. However, they are rare and do need to be disclosed and documented. Important to note, per the ADA, alternate accommodations or reasonable modifications can be offered. If the exception may put another person at greater risk or pose a direct threat, the exemption can be denied. Finally, please offer hybrid instruction. This does not infringe upon the wishes of those requesting in-person instruction. It simply allows a choice for families that feel it would be safer given circumstances and each unique situation. Hybrid instruction would also benefit those that will be in person in that it will allow greater spacing between students if less children are in the classroom. In order to secure the safety and health of the community, we need to institute as many mitigation practices as possible and utilize them consistently without exception. I know that currently this decision is out of your hands, but believe that it will firmly lie within your purview soon. Wearing masks is an act of kindness which not only gives an added layer of protection for the mask wearer, but also for those in close proximity, and by a trickle-down effect to the entire community. Getting vaccinated saves lives. COVID-19 is using the unvaccinated as vectors to grow and morph the virus into far more contagious, transmissible, and deadly strains. It is already 2021, and we are still firmly situated in a pandemic that began in 2019. Please get vaccinated, wear masks, and be kind. Our next comment is from Courtney Ames. I just found out that the University of Pennsylvania will have air purifiers with HEPA filters in every room of the building that I teach in, and I was wondering if Cherry Hill schools have purchased these, and if so, which rooms would have them in use? Thank you for your time. The next one is from Scott and Jill Gutman. Thank you for reading my email and for all of your work. We support the requirement for the African American course. We support the initiative to push high school start time back to 8 o'clock. We would like to see, especially in the fall, as much outdoor education as much as possible. We would like to see interactive outdoor recess and SAC using playground equipment. We would like to see classes outside of above 50 degrees and when it is dry outside. What parameters are in place for taking students outdoors? We want to see a plan for live instruction for students who need to quarantine or who need to take a sick day. Please also consider separate teaching cohorts for children who cannot attend school regularly. We would like to see compensatory education offered after school, especially for elementary students who were unable to participate this summer. Will parents be notified as to how many students and staff are in a classroom and how far our children are spaced apart? We would like to see windows kept open as long as above 50 degrees outside. The plan states only between 68 and 79. We believe this is too narrow. Please notify parents the metrics that will cause a contingency plan to go into place. The more communication provided earlier on, the easier it will be for staff, students, and parents. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to our children being in school this school year. The next one is from Lauren Greenberg. Following up on the public comments that I made at the BOE meeting on August 10th regarding quarantines. According to the NJDOE's Road Forward, LEAs may be confronted with the incidence of COVID-19 positive cases among staff and or students. If an LEA is required to exclude a student, a group of students, a class, or multiple classes as a result of the scenarios listed above, while the school itself remains open for in-person instruction, the LEA should be prepared to offer virtual or remote instruction to those students in a manner commensurate with in-person instruction to the extent possible. Is Cherry Hill prepared to offer virtual or remote instruction for students who have to quarantine for school for 10 to 14 days? What is Cherry Hill's plan to educate these students? I have a few additional questions as well. What is the definition of a close contact in the school environment this coming school year? If a student tests positive, will the students who sit around that student have to quarantine? What is the criteria for allowing students back into school after they've been homesick? Is proof of a negative COVID test required? What happens if a student becomes ill with something other than COVID-19? Will they be forced to quarantine anyway? What happens with students who have colds? In the past, they have attended school. Will they still be allowed to attend school? Will students be allowed to remove their masks when they are outdoors? Will students be allowed to play together at recess without masks, as they have been doing all summer? While I did find your road forward presentation at the August 10th BOE meeting a little more informative than the previous ones, I think there were still many unanswered questions. Being that we are 1 month away from the start of school, I would hope that you would have answers to these questions. I would also like to suggest that you hold a virtual town hall prior to the start of school so the parents can ask questions. Or perhaps each school can have individual town halls. There is so much uncertainty surrounding the start of the school year. We would appreciate as much communication and transparency as possible. Our next comment is from Wally Batista. I have lived in Cherry Hill for almost 19 years. Board members, thank you for your dedication to our community and the countless hours that you dedicate to our schools. Thank you for dealing with the controversial issues and doing what is in the best interest of our children. Now that the governor has mandated masks in schools, we need to ensure that all meals, lunches, lunch, breakfast, snacks are served outdoors. Masks should be worn at all times when inside district buildings, except when a person is alone in a particular space. Mealtime should not be an exception. I know that there are concerns about what to do in the cold weather or when there is inclement weather. We have been dining outdoors at restaurants for months now. Perhaps we can follow that model. Tents or other overhead coverings and heaters have worked well in restaurants. Perhaps we can implement the same model in our schools. Our next one is from Elizabeth Babcock. Hello, I am writing in about two main issues. Would you please reconsider opening up comments at regular meetings to virtual attendees? Limiting comments to those who can attend in person is problematic at best and albeit at worst. Those community members who are immunocompromised, cannot vaccinate, or who work non-traditional business hours should not be excluded from the conversation. Could you please define the policy for those who cannot or will not wear masks? There seems to be confusion at the last BOE meeting for someone with a medical exemption. My understanding is that proper protocol would be to make accommodations for a student or adult unable to wear a mask but would not override the mandate. Can you please speak to procedures for unmasked individuals moving forward? And this comment is from Susan Druckenbrod. I am submitting this comment from the Social Justice Committee at the UU Church in Cherry Hill. We write in support of education about race and racism. We urge you to resist the distorted, manipulative, and dangerous attacks citing critical race theory that are being directed at school districts across the nation. As you know, critical race theory is a college-level academic discipline that examines how racism in the United States has shaped law and public policy. Despite the shouts of some, CRT is not actually being taught in Cherry Hill. Rather, opponents of demonizing CRT as a cynical and false wedge issue. They are trying to stop any education and discussion of the legacy of racism and the many ways racial inequities continue to exist today. Many of us have come to understand we received extremely little education about the unfortunate history of racism in our country as we were growing up, even in college, for those of us lucky enough to attend. We need to study history in order to understand how injustices, racism, and xenophobia developed and how they manifest today. People who are upset about CRT and education about race claim that teaching American history will cause their children to hate America, themselves, and each other. No teacher is teaching that. Best way to ensure dignity and non-discrimination of everyone is to examine our history, learn from it, and make this future better, not by banning the teaching of the effects of our history on discriminatory practices today. Education on race and legacy of racism does not pit people of different races against each other or strive to divide our nation. It does not claim that children are responsible for share guilt for racial oppression, nor does it encourage children to be ashamed of their race. Rather, including race and racism in the study of history recognizes that these are parts of our past and current society. It opens people up to the ways race and racism continue to function in our laws and society. It acknowledges where institutional and systematic racism and inequity exist. Again, I urge you to resist distortions about education on race. It was not evident before. The events of the last year make it clear. Now's the time to champion honest, age-appropriate examinations of our history. I urge you to support clear-headed education on race and racism. Sincerely, the Committee on Racial and Economic Equality, co-chairs Cheryl Duncan Hine, Bill Warner, Susan Druckenbrod. And Mrs. Druckenbrod also submitted Good evening. I'm concerned about lunch. Will hundreds of kids be in the cafeteria? Will you have tents at all schools? And finally, what is the plan for inclement weather? And that is the conclusion of my written comments.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sugars. That'll bring us now to our executive session. The board will meet in closed session at this time to discuss confidential matters pertaining to legal matters. It is expected that matters discussed in closed session shall be made public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists, and no action will be taken this evening. I would like to make a motion to go into executive. Do I have a second? Ms. Stern? All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you.